Hey there guys, in this video we're going to be talking about Brave Exvius. So we've got some questions that we have asked a developer and I've gotten some answers for you. Now originally the goal was, or the plan was, for the developer to come onto the video and answer them directly to you all, but I'll explain to you what happened in just a second. So basically, when Brave Exvius did their end of service announcement, I was kind of, after saying my goodbyes, I kind of was pretty much done with Brave Exvius. But the day after the end of service actually happened, a developer reached out and contacted me. And after being able to confirm they were who they said they were, they wanted to do a video of an Ask Me Anything video. And after they contacted me, we talked, and then I made this Reddit post, want to ask a global dev a limited AMA, and I got some questions from the community. Brave Exvius shut its doors. One of the devs reached out to me, wanted to do an Ask Me Anything session. I was able to confirm who they are. So, in this post, I asked you all to give some questions that we could ask. Also, I got some questions from Discord as well that I sent to the developer. The thing is, after I made this post on Reddit and then started talking on Discord, apparently Gumi took notice and started trying to find out who was talking, basically. Their human resources department was, trying to investigate who was talking out of turn, so to speak. And the developer, after this happened, they kind of got spooked a little bit. So they said that they no longer felt comfortable coming on the video because they don't want to get themselves in trouble, all that. And because I had already told the community, they approached me. I told the community what was going to go on. And then, I totally understand why, but they decided to back out at the last minute. That kind of leaves me hanging here. People are expecting a video that I promised, and then what's going to happen? So after talking to the developer some more, they went ahead and answered questions privately, and they sent me a text of all the answers, etc. And we're going to go over that in a second. But before we do, last thing before we get started, I did, just because, there are legal things involved, I went ahead and contacted a player that I know is also a lawyer in their day job, and we talked for a minute. So after talking to the lawyer friend, he recommends that in order for me to protect myself, I make it very clear at the start of the video. I'm going to be showing you unedited quotes from the developer that I have not edited in any way. These are directly from a second party. Also, I need to say that anything that I say during this video, myself, is my personal opinion, and I am not acting as an agent for Gumi or Square Enix. I cannot speak for them. I have no authority to speak for them. And he says, just make sure that when you're making your video, make that very clear to keep myself out of trouble. So there you go. The answers are coming, that I'm going to show you, are coming from another source, and I personally am not speaking in any official capacity. So with the legal stuff out of the way, let's get to the questions and answers that the developer has chosen to answer. Now, we're going to also go through all the questions myself. We'll talk more about that in a moment, but these are the questions that the developer, who again is really trying to remain anonymous, he sent to me. Also, again, I want to make it clear that he is not trying to embarrass or talk bad about the companies that he worked for, so keep that in mind. Anyway, here's the questions that he sent to me and the answers. So I'm going to read it, but this is the text exactly as was sent to me, unedited. The answers here are based on my own, again, the developer's own, opinion and understanding of the situation, not representative of the various companies involved. I'm not able to go into specifics or reveal anything sensitive due to certain restrictions on my part. Keep in mind they are under NDA and all that. And even this discussion is gray area. I will do my best to share. I will do my best to share the best memories I have of working on this project. And real quick, I will say again, it was told to me it's important to present this unedited. This is unedited. There are quite a few typos. The person is obviously not a native English speaker and all that. So keep that in mind. I didn't fix the typos intentionally because it was told to me that I should present it exactly as is. Anyway, the question of making Brave Exvius a standalone game. His answer, I don't think it's in the cards since JP is still running. Why were the precursor stories abandoned? His answer, I think the members that worked on it left the team and no one officially picked up the mantle. But there were internal references to those ideas with modern units. I'm going to give you my personal thoughts on all this as well, but again, I don't want to mix my thoughts with his answers. So we're going to go through all his answers first, then I'm going to talk my opinions afterwards. So question, was there anything that your team wanted to do or not do, but ultimately got turned down by upper management? If yes, what was this? Answer, LB Drain effect specific silence, such as cannot use mod boost effect skills, but others are fine, etc., were rolled around as ideas internally, but there was never a good time to pitch and push for these ideas. The team was more focused on trying to improve the game at a fundamental level, but were nice and fun what ifs that we wished we could have gone for. Question. Global is a different game was a beloved meme for many years, but what drove the difference between the global and the JP versions? Answer. As far as I understand it, under the hood changes are significant enough to consider global an entirely different game due to the changes that's been made over the years. Those differences are not simply on a visual level, but on how the workflow and processes were as well. Things required or available to the two versions can be, and I think have been, very different. Question. Were you ever surprised with the strategies the player base came up with? Answer. The counter meta was the biggest surprise and also my greatest nightmare. So that's referencing Riku. We'll talk more about that in a bit. What was the process on creating story events like? Any personal favorites or ones that were more fun to work on? Answer. I can't really delve into the specifics, but we chose create maps and enemies based on the story and tried to match the themes to the best of our abilities. I think one I personally enjoyed was the Easter story with Shadow Esther. Question. Did the developer spend any time in the fandom? If so, what did he enjoy seeing in the community? Who were his favorite FFBE original characters? Answer. I don't want to speak for everyone, but I did spend a lot of time looking at feedback and criticism, trying to understand what the community wants. I tried my best to do what I can. It's just that not everything works out perfectly or as desired at times, either due to feasibility, technical complications, or just time and manpower. Question. Were there things you or your colleagues really wanted to implement, fix, or change, but could never do it for whatever reason? Just out of curiosity, of course, not really looking to find culprits or anything like that. And then the answer. Personally, echoed by others too, would have liked to overhaul how vision card leveling worked, but it was something that kind of grew too big to easily fix. I think it would have been an extensive overhaul that just wouldn't have been realistic. Now my personal opinion, I'm glad to hear that because the vision card problem was a major problem that got worse and worse over time. That's my personal opinion. Okay, back to reading this. Question, favorite food? Answer, I enjoy a good steak. Okay. Question, how big was the team specifically for Cow? Also, was this dev assigned to Cow from the beginning or down the road? Answer, it was around a few people alternating and supporting each other while working on other stuff. Other members pitched in ideas and concepts that were adopted. There were guys that worked from the start and some that joined later down the line too. Question, were there any scrapped bosses, any scrapped ideas? Answer, there were plenty of scrapped ideas, usually involving summoning extra minions for some niche mechanic that couldn't be explained very well in-game. It would have been a lot of risk and work for not much payoff in terms of mechanical interest. Question, if you could ask the dev which boss was their favorite, that would be cool. Answer, the Derp Dragon, which is also Aldaba, or Thranator. It was the best feeling when everyone enjoyed the visuals of these two bosses. Question, was there anything in the game that you wish could have been different but weren't able to? Answer, loading times between screens. There was a lot of time spent in loading. That is so true. Question, was there any drama or complaining inside the work area because of how the game was being handled? Honestly, nope. Answer, honestly, nope. I definitely had disagreements in some areas and wanted to do more for the game in others, but at the end of the day, some things have to be conceded to make way for others. The team was a big family, and ultimately, we all try to do the best we can for the game. Question, when designing more challenging content like Clash, to what extent, if any, did Censar factor into what and how the events were designed? Answer, personally, when working on challenging content, I like to think that the designers saw Censar and other content creators. Keep that in mind. This is my little side. Keep that in mind. It wasn't just me. Lots of people made videos for the game, and all of them contributed. Anyway, back to the answer. And other content creators as rivals. And again, this is my personal little input. When they say rivals, they don't mean that in a negative sense. They mean that like they're designing kind of like cross the table from someone playing a game, so to speak, if you know what I'm saying. Like it's not an enemy, it's more like your opponent in a chess match. Something like that. Anyway, that's my own little clarification because it sounded really negative the way it's written. But that's really what they meant. Anyway, back to the answer. We all want to stump them for as long as we could without having to resort to extreme cheese. Sometimes things didn't work out well, other times they did. Question. How wide did the gap become between versions of the game over time? Answer. I believe that the gaps between the versions basically changed how the game was played. Cow was slowly shifting to a more consistent damage sort of meta, while JP content was still to be set up and burst. Again, I don't think English is their first language, so the grammar is a little bit off. The differences were coming out over time, and I felt that it made team build and unit collections become more meaningful, since it's not just the one set of units used to complete all content. Question. I just want a definitive answer on why Chamber of Vengeful wasn't expanded besides the 2 Morganas in Anniversaries, when it was mostly rebalanced, recycled content. Answer. COV, in my opinion, is a lot more work than just recycling old content. Rewards and challenges had to make sense for the amount of work that needs to be put in by the players, and it had to be interesting and meaningful enough to not just 5+1 rotate clear. What they mean by that is doing like a core of 5 units and swapping 1 unit every single clear. So for example, the 50 unit mission would be like 5 units plus 1 would be 6, and then you do it 44 more times, swapping 1 unit each, and that would just be very, very tedious, and that is how a lot of people did it. That's my own personal input. Anyway, back to the official question or answer. If that was all it amounted to, it would have been just more tedious work for players to get rewards when it could have been placed elsewhere in an event that could have already been farmed normally. Question: who is your favorite global original character? Answer: Abigail, best Tonk. Also, having strong tanks on both spectrums with good defensive options allowed us to create situations that meaningfully threatened the full team rather than just the cover tank. Question: if you could have written more global original stories, what would you have wanted to expand on? Answer: I do wish we could have done more unit monster type of stories like Esther versus the Exterminator. Question: what was the reason or influence behind the EX level limit in Clash of Wills? Answer: the primary intention, as I understood it and see it, was to serve as a form of gatekeep protection. Not enough EX levels equals not strong enough. Don't get beat up and feel discouraged. I understand that it was viewed negatively and wish there was a better way to have adjusted it. It probably needed some work to be more robust to work the way we all wish it could have. Question: was there any disagreement or arguments with the JP side regarding how to tune Global's different gameplay? Answer: as far as I understand it, there was no disagreements or arguments between JP and GL. These are as I was sent them. Question: what behind the scenes landmarks, I don't know if this is the right word, of the game do you remember the most, both positively and negatively? Answer: Clash of Wills launch was great. The excitement for the first year of COW is hard to forget. Question: what do you feel the most accomplished about and regretful of? Answer: regret is definitely end of service. I wish I could have done more and saved the game. Accomplishments wise, I believe that everyone on the team did everything we could, even until the end. Okay, so that is the end of the answers and questions as I was sent, exactly as is, no editing whatsoever. That was the list that he chose to answer. So there was, a lot more questions, but for various reasons, either didn't have the answer or was, just to speak honestly, maybe too afraid to answer them because of potential getting into trouble. That was the ones that was chosen to give, was sent to me. So there you go. So we're going to talk some more real quick, but I just wanted to go over that and let you know, and again, as the lawyer friend recommended me to do, that was all directly from the source. Now, for the next part of the video, I'm going to be going through and reading all the questions, and if I can personally provide some insight based on conversations that I have had with other people behind the scenes over the years. I have talked to other people that have worked on the game of Brave Exvius over time. Some of them are more candid than others. All of them have always asked to keep their identity anonymous because, again, they are under contracts and all that kind of stuff. They're not supposed to say anything. So whether they do or not, there you go. But I did have some conversations with, again, not the developer that I just spoke of, different team members over time. So I'll just, from what I can, I will try to share some of the insight I've gotten. And if I can answer any of these questions, I will, that we're going to go through. And again, keep in mind, as I will say it one more time, as the lawyer friend told me to do, I am not speaking in any kind of official capacity for either Gumi or Square Enix. Anything I say, you need to take it as my personal opinion only. There you go. I have now covered myself. Anyway, let's see if I can answer any of these questions. Why did Dassault leave? EMK already kind of answered it, but yes, Dassault did not leave the company. He was reassigned. He was for a time. Early on, Dassault, you saw him in the early videos with Shally and all them. He was part of the, I'm not sure what the official name is, but he was like, I don't want to sound negative, he was like lower in the company. He got moved up later on, and he became a producer. He was actually a producer on the Brave Exvius project for quite a while. To my understanding, he worked on both the global and the JP side as a producer. But eventually he got reassigned. I don't know where or why, but there you go. So why did he leave? Short answer, he got promoted. So he moved on. Something basic. What was the most difficult part when designing a new Clash? The developer kind of answered that already, but again, from things I've talked to in the past, that'd be a really long answer. Basically, it was hard to design a boss within the coding of the game engine Brave Exvius. Sometimes the developers would have a really grand idea that wasn't realistic to code into the game, because you had to make the bosses work within the engine of Brave Exvius. And if Brave Exvius is not coded to handle some really cool idea, they just can't do it. So from what I've talked to people in the past, that was kind of a roadblock in designing bosses for the whole game, not just Clash of Wills. Any boss, a design boss, it had to work within the framework of Brave Exvius, which is not always the most flexible game engine for designing stuff. What were the initial thoughts and reasoning for creating Clash of Wills Another? Okay, so the developer chose to avoid that question for obvious reasons. That's more of like a financial thing. I am not under such restrictions to be able to talk about the stuff. So I will tell you from conversations I have had, Clash of Wills Another was kind of pushed on the global team by the JP side. The short answer is they wanted to make more money. That's the short answer. It was a way to restrict team building and pressure you to need the newer units. That's the really basic version. I mean, that's really no surprise to anyone. Like, we knew that, and I'm giving you, sort of the answer, right, just bluntly. Clash of Wills Another. The goal was to push and further promote unit sales. Obviously, it did not work out at all the way it was intended to, because the goal is to softly push unit sales without making it like a real in-your-face roadblock, and that's how it kind of ended up being. Like, they didn't want it to be such a dramatic, you have to have this, and this. That's how it turned out, and that's why it was so negatively received. But they didn't want it to be that way. They wanted it to just be like a perk to have the newer units, but they kind of missed the mark there. I assume a considerable amount of R&D. Yes, exactly. They did a lot of unit dev time. It was a huge waste of resources. It was a big mistake. Aside from player feedback, what led to the decision to scrap it. I will also tell you that apparently there were more systems that were going to be part of Clash of Wills Another that never got put in, because either they didn't have the manpower, they didn't finish in time, it didn't work properly, because again, the game engine is a big handicap, and maybe they just couldn't get it to work within the Brave Exvius engine. But there was more stuff planned for Clash of Wills Another. For example, the AI of bosses were supposed to completely change during the phase, and it kind of did a little bit within the game's constraints. But from what I was told, like the AI of the bosses would have dramatically changed phase to phase, but because of the way the AI system is coded in Brave Exvius, they couldn't quite get it to work the way it was supposed to, and that got scrapped as well. Was there ever any consideration of memorializing Shally in-game somehow? Okay, so this one is a sensitive question, but I do have the answer for it. So from my understanding is when Shally passed away, it was a huge tragedy, very obviously. But Shally's family did not really want, like, did not really want like a bunch of publicity about their family member's death. So that's why the company never went and did like a Shally unit or a Shally, statue in Grand Shell was suggested. Stuff like that, because the Shally's family did not want it. So that's the simple answer, is the company was respecting the family's wishes, as they should. The family didn't want it, you don't do it. The end, and that's kind of the reason that we never got anything in-game for Shally. Was the failure of Clash Another the turning point for when EOS was inevitable? From what I have spoken to people, it wasn't just Clash of Wills Another. The EOS was not like, there isn't like one thing you can point to and be like, that's why it happened. It's just a culmination of things. Clash of Wills Another is definitely a contributing factor, because all of that sunk resources for developing it was just flushed down the drain. It was just a waste of months of manpower, and the goal with all that manpower being spent developing Clash Another was because the intent was for that to come back, return on investment, is that would drive unit sales a lot higher. So all this time spent, they're going to make all that money back with higher unit sales. Obviously, that did not happen. So all of that, you sunk all of that time and, hours into developing it, and then you just flushed it down the toilet, so you're not getting anything back from that. So that was a huge problem. Also, people would just, leave the project over time, and then the new hires, from what I'm to understand, that the coding of Brave Exvius is very outdated, it's complicated, and when you would hire a new person, it would take a very long time to train them and get them up to speed for how to actually work with the Brave Exvius engine. And then sometimes those people, like right when they're, finally getting over their training, they would leave too, and you would just have like, it was hard to sustain, basically. Did the process begin when the layoffs happened? And this is maybe me even going too far, and I definitely don't. My intent with talking about all this is not to get anyone in trouble. I don't want anyone to get in trouble, so I maybe shouldn't pull back the curtain too far, so to speak. I will say that if you hung out in Discord, you noticed like some of the more prominent members in Discord would start talking about EOS a little bit more seriously around like April or May of 2024. That's when like it was finalized, basically. And that's when like it was the point of no return, is around that time period. At that point, the decision was made, plans were set in motion. There was no righting the ship from that point forward. So early 2024 is when EOS was like, it's going to happen, unfortunately. So there you go. The layoffs was 7th anniversary. That was last year, right? Yeah, so like I would assume that contributed to getting to the point where EOS was going to happen. I'm sure they were trying to cut cost or whatever, and it just didn't work out. And yeah, I don't want to get hung up on this too long. Have there been any consideration for making it available as a standalone? He already answered that, because JP is still going. That's not realistic. Why close in October? That I can't answer. I don't know. Are there any other games that will be using mechanics? JoJo, I can't answer. I don't know. What was the work dynamic between Alim, Gumi, and Square Enix? Who handled development for what? How much wiggle room did each branch have in doing anything? I am familiar slightly with like the way it worked. I'm not familiar enough to really give a valid answer, so I'm just going to avoid the question because I don't know. I do know that the JP side was partially involved in how Global was run. As far as the specifics, I don't know the specifics, so I can't get into it. Why were the precursors abandoned? Because the person that wrote the precursor left the company, moved on. So the author of the story was no longer available. And then these are all player comments. Were there any plans for more events like Defiance of Fate, the Tel Fusanis one? My understanding is the Tel Fusanis event was a success overall, but it was also a tremendous amount of work. And even though it was successful from the player side, it might not have been successful from the business side, because that much work, and while it's good for the game, it maybe didn't bring in enough extra money to justify it. Now me as a player, I loved it. I would have loved to have seen more. But when I asked basically the exact same question to a team member in the past, the short answer was it was too much work. That was the short answer. Like, the answer, I'm sure, could get a lot more in depth, but it was too much work was the short answer I was given. I always wondered why the devs decided to have collabs with the divas, Katie, Ariana, Addison Rae, and all that. Why'd they do it? So basically, they did it to increase the what's the correct word? Increase the reach of the game. I guess that's not the way to. My mind is going blank. Basically, they wanted to make the game more noticeable by other players, and it worked. Like, you'll see in some of the comments, some people were saying that, yeah, this is the reason to bring people. Ariana made me play the game. That's the simple reason. The simple reason. So if you're a Brave Exvius player, you may think that, Katy Perry has no business being in the Final Fantasy world. You wouldn't be wrong, in my opinion. But at the same time, it got a lot of Katy Perry fans to install the game, try it out. And while a lot of them may have left shortly afterwards, a bunch of them stayed. And that's the reason. It brought in more players. Now, was it worth the cost? Because, again, it's a little bit behind the scenes. From my understanding, is they were very expensive to pay for, and they took like a big fee. Did it justify it? I don't know. That I do not have the answer to. I've heard that they were expensive. I do not know if the cost or the return overcame the cost, so to speak. Next question. Was there anything that your team wanted to do but ultimately got turned down? But he already answered that. Are you currently working on any other games right now? I don't want to answer that for the developer. Thank you, Sinzar, for all the work you've done. You're very welcome. Global is a different game. This is the one he answered specifically. Brave Exvius was the most diverse. Okay, so the developer did answer that, and I don't want to contradict their answer or anything. I will say, again, with the disclaimer that the developer is under certain obligations, I am not. So I can be a little bit more sensitive or less sensitive about this answer. But I don't want to get anyone. Okay. Out of respect, I'm going to avoid the question. I'm going to avoid the question. How did you test and decide the balance for Clash of Wills? He already answered that one. He answered it pretty well. Please beg the higher ups to make Brave Exvius a console game for the story. As cool as that would be, it seems like it's not going to happen. And the developer himself even specifically said probably not. So unfortunate. Tinfoil hat. Sinzar is asking all these questions to himself. Gumi Spy all along. It was Sinzar all along. You got that right. No. It's kind of hilarious because it almost seems exactly like that's what's happening. But no, like I was done with Brave Exvius. After the EOS, after my Goodbye videos, I intended to never post a Brave Exvius video again, at least not for the global version, because I was done with the game. But I was messaged specifically a few days ago and brought out of retirement, and then, like I said, I probably should have never posted anything on Reddit asking for questions, because that stirred up a hornet nest and scared away the dev and left me hanging here having to do it by myself. It was not intended that way. If it was intended, if the whole thing was me just being like a tinfoil hat, I'm just, haha, making all this up, I wouldn't have started off this post saying he's going to be here, because that makes me look dumb now that he's not here. No, he was going to be here, and he got scared away. That is not my fault. That is not my fault. Okay, but seriously, there was obviously ongoing issues taking the JP game data and layering in the global data. How much was that a deciding factor? Okay, so basically the dev did already answer this question. Yes, the global version and the JP version were almost like two different games, because they were so different. Under the hood, that is. What was the process on create? He already answered this one. 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 Okay, he already answered all those. How hard was it to add Clash of Wills to the game? It was a lot of work. So, as far as like to give you a, quantifiable response, I really can't. I do know it was a lot of work. I do know it made a tremendous amount of extra coding. Was it worth it? That's a hotly debated topic. Shout out to Maxie in the Discord, who goes on every day about how Clash of Wills was not good for the game. On the other hand, I feel it was good for the game. That's a whole different debate for another time. Was Clash worth adding to the game? I think it was. I think a lot of people think it was. Some people think it wasn't. You can debate that till the cows come home. But was it hard to add to the game? It was. It was a lot of work. It made it very challenging to code. The better question is, was it worth it? And I can't give you a exact answer. When it comes to things like the advanced expert missions, the Moogle dungeon, the Shard dungeon, what were the design? Okay, so basically this is saying, to summarize, why did Global make changes from the JP version that were unpopular? For example, they held back enhancements. They took like an extra year to give us the Moogle dungeon, all that kind of stuff. I don't have a exact answer for you, because this is a topic that I would frequently message people on the team, because I did have contact with some people on the team, and I would frequently say, like, bro, what's up? Like, why are you doing these idiot changes to the game? To be blunt about it, like, it's, we're 6 months late for the Moogle dungeon. Why is it still not here? Stuff like that. The basic answer I was usually given is, it's the boss's call. So, I didn't have access to like Hiroki and stuff. So it was either someone on the JP side or someone on the global side that was higher up, and they would just say, not yet. And the workers just had to do it. So I usually had contact with like the workers. I didn't have contact with the bosses. So I can't give you the why did they do that, but I can say that I would frequently send feedback behind the scenes and be like, why are these bad changes happening? And I would not get satisfactory responses, so I can't really give you a good answer. To this day, I'm still a little bit bitter that some of the decisions were made that way. What was the timeline for events from concept, design, testing, implementation? Okay, so for events, I don't specifically know how long that would take. I do know that I was told, I think they even said this in the video one time, like the unit design process was approximately 6 to 8 months. From the very beginning design to, animations, art, kit, testing, all that, it would take about 6 to 8 months for a unit to be designed, created, tested, etc. As far as events, I can't answer. I don't know. I don't have that answer. Please give insight on what maintenance entailed. Why did maintenance take so long? So basically, what I'm to understand is the maintenance is because they did not have a dedicated test server. So anything that needed testing in the game, they would do that during that maintenance period. So that 6 to 8 hours of maintenance was when they would take the live server and use it to test the latest coding updates. Now you might be asking, Why didn't they have a dedicated testing server? Can't answer you. Me as a user or a player, I would say that seems obvious, but I'm not a coder. I'm not a programmer. I can't tell you why, but whatever the reason is, they did not have a dedicated testing server, so they would do a lot of the testing on the live servers during maintenance. And the reason they did it during maintenance is because anything they broke, they could fix. And that's why maintenance would often get extended, is because during testing, they broke something and they needed time to fix it, so maintenance would be extended. So there you go. How are the responsibilities split between Gumi and Square? Okay, so again, this is, the dev really wanted to make it clear that that's a sensitive subject that I shouldn't get into too much, because that could really stir up a hornet's nest, and I don't want to get anyone in trouble. I don't want to get anyone in trouble. So it's hard for me to bite my tongue, because this is a topic I'm a little bit bitter about, but in respect for the people that have talked to me and don't want me to stir the hornet's nest, we're going to avoid that question, even though it pains me to do so. It pains me to do so. Okay, I can't answer this. What language is frame? I have no idea. That I have no idea. That's coding stuff. I have no idea. That's a personal question. Can't answer that. Did working on the game help your day job or hinder your enjoyment of the game? Okay, so I'm not entirely sure if he wants me to say this. I'm going to take a risk. It's kind of minor, but I will say that a developer that so forgetting the developer we talked to a minute ago, I will say that some of the people working on the game did not actually play the game. And I know that's like kind of a meme. Oh, they don't even play their own game. It's an unfortunate reality that some of the people working on the game were not actively players of the game. On the other hand, some of them were active players of the game. So did every single person working on Brave Exvius actively play the game? Did they log in daily and do their arenas and item worlds, and did they do their events? No. Some of the devs did not actively play the game. Now, you don't have to actively play to still understand the game, so that doesn't mean they couldn't do their job. But to answer this question, did working on the game as your day job help or hinder your enjoyment of the game? That really depends on the developer you ask, because some of them didn't actually play the game. On the other hand, the ones that did play the game, did working help or hinder? That's a personal question. You have to ask them. I can't answer it for you. How do they feel about data being mined pre-launch? Did they monitor the threads for reaction in any capacity? How much of a oops moment was the 2B overflow bug? So this is a question I did ask in the past, because, it's just a curiosity question. And I did say, what in the world did I do? I clicked the wrong button somewhere. What in the world was that? Whoops. Anyway, yes. So how do the devs feel about unit data being data mined? So the answer I was given when I asked this in the past is they are aware that data mining happens, and technically speaking, there were ways they could have prevented data mining by using heavy encryption on the data or whatever. There's ways to make it so you can't data mine. I was basically told that it's not that big a deal, and in order to try to fight the data miners and encrypt it, because no matter how much they encrypt the data, if there's someone out there good enough at programming, they can still get into it anyway. So it would have been a bunch of resources spent trying to stop the data mining that are just not worth it, because even people are hacking and stuff all over the place. So you would have to be better than the most interested data mining hacker or whatever to stop it. So it wasn't worth trying to stop the data mining, is what I was told. And did they mind it? Honestly, they didn't really that much. It would have been better to keep it all a surprise, but it was overall a minor thing, and trying to stop the data mine would have been way too much work. So they didn't. When did you realize EOS was imminent? So the developer, I'm not going to speak for them. I will say, like I said, if you were hanging out in Discord around early May or so, that's when it was sort of cat out of the bag for certain people, and it wasn't, there you go. How long were they releasing paid content knowing full well it wouldn't last long? That's a debatable topic. I'm not going to get into that can of worms right now about the morality of selling stuff knowing it's going to be. That's a different discussion. And again, the developers had no say-so on this. Keep in mind, the developers are not the producers and the managers, the owners, the directors. They're the ones that make this decision. The developers are just the workers that do stuff. So if the boss says keep on developing even though EOS is coming, if you want to keep your job, you do what you're told. So you don't get upset at the developers for this. That is more of the business side, like the owners and all that. They make that decision. Was there ever a plan for some kind of limited offline mode before EOS was announced? I can say that, to my knowledge, there was no real plan. The development side was not planning to make an offline mode. If player feedback was so strong that they do it in the future someday, okay. But from what I've heard, there was no plan to, let's do an offline mode. Not really. Was any of Square's code commented? If so, to what extent? I can't answer that. I have no idea. That never came up in our discussions. How hard or easy? I can't answer that. I have no input. When designing more challenging content like Kyle, he already answered that one. What was the size of the production database? Was it one large? I can't answer that. I have no idea. That's a coding question. I have no clue. Yeah, when I would talk to the people behind the scenes, I wouldn't ask this kind of stuff because I'm not a coder. Even if they did answer it, I wouldn't know what they were talking about. So I never asked. I have no idea. I can't answer you. Can you teach us how to open an unofficial server? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say the developer is not going to do that. But yeah. One simple question. From who was it ordered to delay or outright skip upgrades for units until they were not useful anymore? Okay, so that I already covered above. Basically, that was from the producers and the directors and all. They would make the decision. If you're asking for what specific person did it, I couldn't really point to one person and tell you, Joe Bob did it. I don't know. But yeah, that was a decision that came down from management, and management would say, skip Bart's upgrades, and the developers had to do it, whether they wanted to or not, because if the manager says skip an upgrade, you do what you're told. So, management, basically. And I can't really give you a specific name because I don't know. So there you go. Who was your favorite glow? You already answered that. Why didn't you continue trying to improve Kyle another? So he didn't answer that specifically, but basically Kyle another flopped pretty hard around by memory, late January, early February, maybe March. And EOS was, determined at the upper level around the end of April, beginning of May. So a month or so after it flopped, the game was just determined to be done anyway. So at that point, it was we're not investing anymore. So there you go. How are Kyle bosses chosen or crafted in terms of design lore? That's a good question that I don't have a specific answer for. And he didn't answer himself, so I don't know. I'd be curious to know that, but I don't really have an answer for you. Apart from the failure of Clash's big mode change, were there any other changes to Kyle that got tested internally that never got released? Yes, and he already answered that. There was stuff they tested and never came to pass. Since Since this gets brought up a good bit, how wide did the gap between the versions? Oh, he already answered that. Yeah, it was basically a different game. The largest reason JP and Sakamu. So this no. So the reason that the JP updates didn't come to global is not because they couldn't be done coding. It's because the manager said don't do it. Yeah, so that I can answer. Yeah, the reason they skipped upgrades, it's not because they couldn't do the upgrades. It's because the manager said don't do the upgrades. And in some cases, it's not because they said don't do them because they don't want us to have them. It's because in order to do them, it still requires work. Like someone has to go in and do something. They have to either test them, translate them, whatever. So it's not like they said don't do it because I don't want the players to have it. They said don't do it because it would just take away the time you're spent doing this other thing. Do you get what I'm saying? And my personal opinion, I would say, well, if you need more manpower, just, hire more people, but that's a whole different can of worms. Whatever. Was the first Esther really changed in maintenance because the sub went nuts and realized she would have been too powerful? So that we've gone back and forth on. I've talked before about how, yes, they monitored it. And after that, someone told me that they did have internal checks running at the time. So even though, yes, the Reddit post did raise the red flag, they apparently already had the numbers anyway and probably would have changed her anyway. So that's like going back and forth. So we're not going to go through that again. That was like one of the memorable controversies of Brave Exvius. Do you guys keep an eye on Reddit and content creator videos when making decisions for the game? I can tell you 1,000% yes. Yes, they monitor Reddit and Discord and content creators constantly. Like I said, this post, the game's dead, and I made this post on Reddit, and a few hours later, their human resources department is contacting staff. Like, yes, even after the game's dead, they are still monitoring Reddit and social media and all. They have people that their sole job is to sit there and monitor the game's social media and all that. So yes. Could FFBE return in some way? I can't answer that. It'd be nice, but I can't answer that. Should it return as if... yeah, it'd be nice. It'd be nice. And for you, thank you. And thank you as well. Who created the OG Roberta and the NV one and they had more art of her? Who created the OG Roberta? So Roberta... Oh, no, that's the... Okay. So I do know who created the NeoVision's Roberta, but you're asking the OG Roberta. I don't know who created the OG Roberta, the original Roberta. I don't know. I do know exactly who created the NeoVision's Roberta, at least as far as the unit kit, not the sprite, the kit. Who created the OG? I don't know. Good question. I can't answer that. What was the turnover rate of devs? Are there people who stayed on the entire 8 years? Hiroki was here from day one. So Hiroki was here from the whole 8 years. Does he count? As far as other people besides Hiroki, the turnover rate, I couldn't answer you specifically. I don't really know. So I can't say. Are most devs also players that play for fun? So that one I did cover. Some of them yes, some of them no. I know for a fact some of them did not play. I know for a fact some of them did play. So, yeah, as far as what is the ratio, I couldn't tell you. Was there a large-scale plan at the start for the lore behind the global units, or was it mostly made up as it went all along? So I don't know if it was I don't know. I do know that specific people were working on it, and then they left the company for one reason or another, and then the storylines got scrapped. But I don't know if they wrote it all on a storyboard in advance, whatever. I couldn't tell you. Will any of the FanFest characters make appearances in other games again? I couldn't tell you. What goes into designing and creating units? I couldn't give you a specific thing. Yeah, I really can't answer that, so I couldn't tell you. He already answered that. When a banner brought in, when a banner brought in more income than anticipated, what was the reaction among the team? Were there bonuses, a party, anything like that? I couldn't answer you. I have no idea. I would assume, but I have no idea. How much long ago were you told the game was reaching EOS, and what was your work? What was your last work you made into? That's a strange sentence. Okay, yeah. So EOS we knew about since early April. Why were there so many skipped content like the Saga, Sinnoh Alice, and Bravely Default? So as far as collaborations go, that I can speak to a little bit. Collaborations are complicated because, for one thing, you need permissions and licenses from everyone involved. So everyone that owns any kind of license to that collaboration, they have to all agree to the collaboration. They have to all come to an agreement for like the payment and all that. Also, it needs to be something that will, again, return on investment. So if there's some like really niche collaboration the JP server does, like, the Family Mart collaboration is a perfect example. In JP, there was a Family Mart collaboration. That's apparently like a store chain in Japan that only exists in Japan. So obviously, doing a Family Mart collaboration in global would make absolutely no sense because no one outside Japan even knows what Family Mart is. So yeah, collaborations have to be widely appealing. Now, some of these, maybe they just weren't popular enough outside of Japan. I don't know the exact answer, but that's kind of thing that goes into a collaboration. Is it they have to feel like it's going to be popular enough that players care about it. So if they feel like it was not popular enough outside of Japan, it'll be skipped over. Also, again, as I mentioned, everyone involved has to agree. So if there was a collaboration, like, I'm just making this up, but let's just say someone on the Sinnoh Alice team didn't agree to come to global, well, they just can't do it then. So there you go. Chinese original units were released as last-minute ideas, or were they always planned? I can't answer that with any kind of backup or facts. Again, my personal assumption, this is not based on past conversations. Most of these answers are based on past conversations with team members, but this one I'm just making up myself. I would assume that those sprites were just done as like recycled, real easy to do. I cannot say with any authority if they were always planned or not. I don't know. I wondered if he already answered that question in the official one. Okay, so here's one that he skipped over for obvious reasons, but I'm going to answer. So one of the skips, like Cater versus Trey, no one cares about Trey. Cater was better, etc. So here is, again, we're getting into that sensitive area where I don't want to stir anything up, but I feel like it has to be answered. So these kind of decisions where players of the game understand a decision and certain people don't. This is examples of some of the management that did not play the game and does not understand the game. So why was Trey chosen and not Cater? That's because in the eyes of certain of the management that doesn't actively play the game, in their mind and their eyes, Trey is a damage-dealing unit. Damage-dealing units, according to history, sell better than support units. Obviously a big damage dealer is going to sell more than a support unit. So a manager that doesn't play the game and doesn't understand the game in the least says, okay, we're only going to allocate enough manpower to bring over one unit this week. One unit is getting cut. I know that support units usually make less money than damage dealers. Go ahead and sell the damage dealer. Put Trey in, skip Cater. So this kind of decision is made by a manager that has no idea about the game itself, and they only know things from spreadsheets. even though Trey is worthless and Cater would have been a much more valuable unit, a spreadsheet says damage dealers sell more, therefore we're going to put in the damage dealer and skip the support unit. And this, in my opinion, is one of the big reasons that Brave Exvius did not do as well as it could have done, is because some of the people in charge of the game were not active players of the game, and they made goofy decisions like this. Same thing about skipping Cloud. They put in things like Lastwell, Rain, the Crimson Roost, and they skipped Cloud. Those are just like brain dead decisions by people that have no idea what they're doing. And yes, so unfortunately, sometimes people that don't know what they're doing are in charge. And that's unfortunate. And when the person in charge makes a goofy decision, they're in charge. You got to just do it. You work for them. You do what they say. Yeah, so there you go. Did the developer spend any time... You already answered that one. Did they consider putting the entire story on the official YouTube channel? I can't answer that. It'd be nice. I can't answer that, though. I have no answer. Why haven't they hired Sinzar? In order to say the game makes lots of money. So, if you want an honest answer here, if they had offered me a job, I probably would not have taken it, because for one thing, I'm not moving to either Singapore or Japan. But no, that's a common thing in games, is the player base believes that, like, a popular content creator would be better at the game than the devs. You maybe in some small areas, but for the most part, I have no experience like running a game, and I probably would not be a successful project manager, honestly speaking. I feel like I could maybe have given some like insight to certain things, but as far as running the game, not for me. So, and I do realize this is kind of a joke question. I probably shouldn't even have answered it, but yeah, why didn't they hire me? For one thing, I'm not really looking to go move across country or across the world. And number two, I probably wouldn't be a very good manager anyway. So there you go. Was there ever any discussion about having Brave Exvius offline so people could play it? Again, because the JP version. I'm not entirely sure why that would be a roadblock, but that's what he says, and we're going to go with it. As just a personal player, I don't see why that would be a roadblock, but that's what he says. We're going to go with it. So how big was the team? He already answered that. He already answered that. Oh, this one. Regarding events, how did they decide which to skip and which ones to not? Again, that was mostly a decision made by managers, and some of the managers didn't play the game, so it's almost like they were throwing darts at a dartboard. There you go. I want to ask a few things. If there's a chance for an offline version, we already went over that. Why the same product did not work in global and JP is still going? Because it's two different games, teams, markets, etc. What was the procedure? We already answered that. Were there any ideas that were implemented that you or others disagreed with fear of upsetting the player base? Again, that's one of those things, like the developer may disagree with something, but if a manager says do it, you gotta do it. I think you already answered most of these. Yeah, he answered most of these. Was there anything you or your colleagues really want to implement? You already answered that. Why was Tactics Advanced never introduced to the game? So for this one, I can't give you an exact answer, but I can say, very similar to collaborations, you need the approval of all of the team. So if there was someone on the Tactics Advanced team in Square Enix that either didn't want to or wasn't available, or just wasn't interested, someone on the Square side that owns the Tactics Advanced license either wasn't interested, was never contacted, or whatever. But you need their approval. So I'm just assuming that they didn't approve, but I don't know. I'd love to get to the bottom of the end. Did they stop DV because of cheat? Okay, so the DV. I'm glad somebody asked that, because that I do want to talk about. Did they stop doing DV because of cheating? Ultimately, no DV code the game. Okay, so basically the DV. So okay, so so this one, out of respect for the person that talked to me, I probably shouldn't go into as much detail as I'd like to. So let's just say that the cheating was a problem and they wanted to deal with it, but it was very manpower intensive, and I want to almost repeat the answer word for word, but I really don't think I will say that they were aware the cheating was a problem, and even though I personally really disagree with what they did, I'm going to move on out of respect for people that talk to me in confidence, and I as much as I want to answer that, I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna move on. What else? Oh yeah. Okay. Here's one I can definitely answer. People with macros. Okay, so the whole macro situation, macro chaining and all that. Do they feel chaining was a problem? Okay, so macros are so. Yeah, because this is a question that I did ask, and it was explained to me their stance on macroing and all. Basically, if they were to actively enforce not allowing macros, for example, like banning players that use emulators and all that, that they could have done that, but macros weren't really a problem in so much as they were allowing you to do something you couldn't already do anyway. So, for example, people that do modded APKs and Esper mods and all that, that's obviously cheating. That they have to deal with. But someone that is macroing a chain, it's not that you couldn't do it anyway. So anyone can perfect chain with the right timing. Macros simply made it more consistent. So they were okay with macros, and this is a question I did ask. And they could, if they had, clamped down on macroing, all it would have done was just pushed away players. Because, as you say, some players, that they have a handicap and they can't chain, period, and they're using macros to help. Other players, like myself, used macros as a convenience because it was convenient. And making the game more inconvenient is just not something a developer wants to do. So they could have cracked down on macros, but they chose not to because it's minor, it's not harming the game, and all it would have done was push away players. What they did do over time is they made chaining easier. So exactly as John ID says, is we stopped seeing things like Aurora Ray or Quick Hit, Pile Driver, all those really hard to chaining families that required macros, or didn't require, but macros made more realistic to do. They just stopped making those chain families, and they started making only things like Bolting Strike, Absolute Mirror, the easy to chain families, so that even if you weren't using a macro, you could still, for the most part, perfect chain without too much problems. So there you go. Yeah, there's their macro stance that I do have a direct answer for. They apparently a lot of discussion about it. At the game's peak, trial bosses. We already answered this. Yep, we already answered this. Was there ever any internal talks of building a new app to help with development speed, to help the support? So I will say that I have heard that they did want to do other versions of Brave Exvius. For example, it was talked about bringing Brave Exvius to Steam for the PC. It never happened, but there was talk about it. So yes, there was talk about different versions of the app. It just never came to pass for, I don't know exactly why. Was War of the Visions always planned, and did it divert resources from Brave Exvius instead of creating more content and focus? Okay, so here's another question that I have personally directly asked and gotten an answer to. So the answer is yes and no. It's a little bit of a complicated answer. So did War of the Visions directly take resources from Brave Exvius? No, in a sense. I'm kind of giving non-answers here, but also yes. So yes, it was explained to me, and I'm trying to think of the way it was explained, and trying to reset. This was like 6 months ago that I had this conversation. Oh God, what did he say? The answer was, it was such a complicated answer. He spent like 10 minutes explaining it. I still was confused at the end of it. I'm still confused. And trying to re-explain it is even worse. So the way it works is like there are project managers for both Brave Exvius and War of the Visions. For example, Hiroki. He manages both. And while the budget of Brave Exvius and the budget of War of the Visions is not connected, the human manpower is split. So, for example, if Hiroki, just as an example, as a complete made up example, as if the manager of both projects only has 8 hours in the day, let's just say he's got 5 problems to solve in both versions, then they may spend 6 hours working on one game's issues and only spend 2 hours in the other games. So if you're asking, did the budget of one game directly influence the budget of another game? Not really. But did it take away resources and divert resources? Kind of, yes, because people that were working on both projects had divided attention. So because, for example, there was a manager of 2 games, that manager was not giving 100% of their focus to one game. He was now dividing his focus between 2 games, which obviously means both games have less focus. And of course, one game gets more focus than the other. So, there you go. Did War of the Visions directly steal resources from Brave Exvius? No. Did War of the Visions existing divert attention and focus from Brave Exvius? Yes. There you go. Would it have been a good idea to create a new Brave Exvius instead of War of the Visions? I mean, that's literally what they did. That's what they did. They took Brave Exvius and War of the Visions is Brave Exvius 2. Kind of. You know what I mean? So, Brave Exvius Fantex ID, wonderful story. Are there any talks of the game being reworked and released? There is not currently, no. That's not to say it'll never happen. Thank you, blah, blah, blah. Thank you, and thank you as well. Okay, what was the real deal of never having a Chrono Trigger? You've probably heard this before, because the rights to Chrono Trigger are complicated, and it's just not going to happen, unfortunately. Are all the pixel sprite characters and animations going to be saved, archived in some way to make available for family projects? Okay, so officially, no. Unofficially, according to people talking in Discord, they've already saved everything. As far as how can you get access to them, ask in Discord. I don't know. Will the game ever be made into a full game? Probably not. But again, it's okay. So right here, so an action RPG like the April Fool's trailer. I will say some behind the scenes. So the April Fool's trailer, from what I'm to understand, was actually gameplay footage from a game they were developing. That was a real game they were developing, and it got scrapped. But they didn't make that for April's Fools. They just took existing gameplay footage that they were doing for promos and stuff, and they made that into an April Fool's. But yes, that 3D game was going to be a real game that got canceled, unfortunately. What was the overall atmosphere on the global team? According to the dev, he said they were all like a family. How often the JP changes affect development? All of the time. Yes. So that is something, again, that I've heard about, is when JP would introduce a new mechanic, Global would have to adapt to deal with it. For example, to go towards the end, when JP introduced Overdrive, Global was like, well, okay, now we have to balance around Overdrive. When JP introduced Fields, Global was like, okay, we have to balance around Fields. So yes, JP's development, JP would lead the development and Global would have to follow along. So therefore, Global, yes, JP changes always affect the development, because if JP did it, Global would have to do it in the future. I thought it was today. Unfortunately. Can you ask if there was any discussion about bringing Clash of Wills to the JP side of the game? And why didn't they so far? So that, I can't really give you a specific answer. I don't really have any contacts on the JP side, so I can't answer that. I can only speculate, and I can't answer. He already answered this. He already answered this. He already answered this. This, I can't answer. Couldn't tell you. As the creator of King Beam, oh, hello. What happens to the rights of the fan? Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. What happens to the rights of the fan design characters? I have no idea. I wish I had an answer for you. I don't know. That's a good question, though. If more than one question can be answered, I'd really like to know the process behind designing his moveset. Oh, yeah, so that he kind of covered. I can't really give you any more than he already gave you, though. Are they considering making an offline version? That's a very popular request. Unfortunately, they are not. Would they be able to ask JP, add any other language packs to the game? So, I got to be honest here. I got to be completely honest here. I personally do not understand why the JP version doesn't simply translate their game to English, because it would obviously increase users and increase sales, but they don't. It seems, to me as a user, it seems so easy to just hire a translator and print money. Why wouldn't you do that? It's so easy. Just translate the game. But they don't. So I can't tell you why. I have no idea. Last question is for me. What do you plan to play in the future? Will you keep making videos for the JP version? What games do I plan to play next? I am a huge fan of indie games. Unfortunately, in my opinion, most indie games, even though they're really fun, many of them are not fun to watch. They're really not pretty graphically for the most part. A perfect example is Tales of Magiel. I'm saying that correctly. That's an indie game I play every now and then. If I recorded Tales of Magiel, it would be the most boring thing ever to watch someone play. It's like watching someone play tic-tac-toe. It's not fun to watch. It's fun to play, but you wouldn't have fun watching me play it. You get what I'm saying? So that's why I don't record many of the indie games, because it would get no users and no viewers, and you just would not like seeing me play indie games. The ones I do think are fun to watch, I post every now and then. And will I keep making videos for the JP version? Probably, but I'm not super excited about JP right now. I feel like JP is just going through absurd power creep one after the other, and that kind of turns me away. So I haven't even played JP in 3 weeks. So I'll probably post in the future, but can't tell you. At what point did you know EOS was inevitable? I already talked to that. Was there any ideas you wanted to implement but ultimately turned down? There was. What would you say is the peak of Brave Exvius? This is a question for the dev. That's an opinion question, so I can't answer that. The questions I'm answering are questions that I have factual conversations about. This is an opinion question that I can't answer. What was the reason or influence behind the EX Love? We already talked about that. What global original unit does not currently have an NV version that you would have liked to create? That's a personal question. You can't answer it. Which character had the most spent on it pull-wise over the course of the game? Unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that. I can speculate, but I don't have the answer to that. So I couldn't really tell you. Is there something that we haven't asked that you're desperately wanting to share? That's a personal question. Some story or development happens with the office no one would have known about. It's pretty obvious. That's, again, personal question. I can't answer. If they merged if they merged War of the Visions with JP, why didn't they do it to Global and JP Brave Exvius? I can't answer specifically, but I can say that, like the dev already said, the games were so different in terms of content-wise, coding, units, etc. It would have been a massive undertaking. Could they have still done it? Probably, but I guess it would have cost like a lot of money and time, and they just decided it's not worth it. I don't know. Why the Brave Exvius devs didn't make the decision to dump Gumi, get other company? That's a pretty insensitive question, but I don't have the answer for it anyway. Will the characters be able to be rescued? Rain, Lastwell, and Fiend are great protagonists. Will they ever use them again? I can't answer that. I have no idea. I hope so. Can you describe the process of designing a unit from a gameplay perspective? He kind of already did. How did you decide how much damage you were supposed to deal? Just with the business and banner profits in mind. So that's a question that I kind of did ask in the past. Is like, how did you? Okay, so this is a question that I did ask in the past. So it's a long answer. It really is a long answer. So the question that I asked was, how come some units are so disparaging from other units? For example, like, how do you release, Esther one week and Tiana the next week? How do you release a great unit and then a garbage unit the following week? The developer said that I spoke to, a previous developer, they said that sometimes unit design, they're doing an experimental idea, and it doesn't always work out. So some of those units, for example, the original Kaito, the 7-star Kaito, who remembers Kaito? As awesome as he was in terms of sprite and all, his kit was useless. Kaito was all about damage over times, which technically they made into a mechanic, but Brave Exvius just does not support damage over times. So again, like something like the Kaito was an experiment that did not work out. Did not work out at all. So sometimes the units that are really, really bad were experimental that flopped. Now my question to them at that case was, why don't you fix the units? Like, if Kaito was so bad, why didn't you buff him? Why didn't you change him? Why didn't you adjust him later on? And now, you might not want to hear this answer, and I didn't like to hear it either, but I understood it. His blunt reply to me was, it's better to just simply start over with a new unit and sell that new unit, as opposed to spending lots and lots of time redesigning and adjusting a already released unit that didn't work. So it's not a pretty answer. You don't want to hear that. But that's the blunt reality answer is, when a unit is released that's not good, it's more efficient for the company to simply move on and make a new unit and try again next time, instead of spending lots and lots of development time redesigning a unit that is already out. There you go. Shouldn't they refund us? That's a business question. I can't answer that. Can we get a localized version? Unfortunately, no. Why no offline version? That's such a common question. Why does JP stay up when Global contributes? JP is a different game. And then this person is unhappy and mad at me, so we're going to ignore him. So there we go. There is questions and answers from the developer, and then some follow-up questions and answers that I was hopefully able to provide insight after 8 years of me having some contact with team members over time. There it is. And if the developer himself would like to come on and answer anything directly, I welcome him to come to Reddit and post replies. But again, based on the company's reaction, that seems unlikely. Okay, I will see you guys next time. Later.